It was the entire team on the roof, I would assume of the office building, but it was the entire team. It was like 50 people and nobody wore a mask. So to me, that's like, whoa, we're entering 2021.
I was like, take off that hat and put on the podcast host hat. There we go. Okay.
Words is really not a relevant thing. You can work on time, how long has the post editor had to spend on this task, or you can actually say how many characters have had to be changed.
And welcome to SlaterPod 61. Hello from Zurich.
Hello from London.
Hey, here at SlaterPod, your language industry's favorite podcast. On the show today, we have Bob Villens, the CEO of XTM, the
Very good.
translation management system software company. So we have Bob on because he's been in the industry for a very long time, has a lot of experience and has a lot of interesting thoughts to share, but also they've recently had an investor. They brought an investor in, a company called K1, LA-based investment firm. They acquired the majority of XTM in, I think, late January. I'm not sure if we covered it late January, but definitely early Feb. We covered it. Yeah. I think the deal closed in late January.
Yes.
XTM's quite large for a TMS company. I think they have a revenue run rate of around $11.5 million. As I mentioned, it's pure software, so no services, no mixing between the two. I remember we had a bit of a discussion there at SlaterCon Remote with Jack from SmartLink, but basically XTM is very much laser focused on the software side. They do employ 182 people, so it's quite a large company, probably most of them developers, right? And some sales. So Bob, coming up in 20 minutes, 25 minutes, depending how long it takes us to get through the LSPI, the big launch this week.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that.
Yeah, well, so as you say, we launched this week, which is very exciting. I think we had more than 170 companies, LSPs participating when we launched, and that figure has continued climbing after launch. So that's great because people are still submitting their numbers, which is great, and they can absolutely continue to do that because it's all very valuable information. And so far, I think we have about 65 new companies, which is nice as well. So we've got new people coming onto that LSPI also. So these are companies, all of whom have generated revenues of at least $1 million in 2020. And we've got a new format, which I like. It's really interactive compared to, I think, the sort of table view that we had last year and the previous years. But so you're basically sort of seeing all of the companies in order of revenues, starting with the highest. So a bit of an overview, and you can click on the card, the record, to expand it and see a bit more information about the company, like the headquarters, 2019 performance, growth rate, ownership, a lot of other stuff as well. And we've made it filterable, so you can actually filter all of the records, all of those 170 plus records now. You can filter them based on headquarters, based on the region, based on the segment, and a lot of different filtering as well.
And it's got the logo for visual.
It has the logo. It also has the link to the company's websites. So yeah, a lot of good information in there.
I like it. It looks a lot better. I mean, the other one was kind of all in one, but very compact, right? And this one is it's a lot more interactive. You can sort a lot better. And it just looks cool. I mean, you click boom, and that little card opens up. So, so basically, the LSPI again, you need $1 million or more to participate. Well, $1 million of revenue a year.
It is free to enter.
It is free to enter.
Yeah.
And we're now at 170, probably 180. So this is just going to expand as we go along, and it's good to see. So we have 4 categories, just reminding people again. We got what we call the super agencies. So those are like full service, offering everything under the sun. The TransPerfects, the RWSs, and now Accolade, We Localize. So those are the super agencies. We got the leaders. That's from 25 million to, up to the super agency. category challengers 8 to 25 million in revenue, and then boutique 1 to 8. And and so yeah, you're saying so we're still receiving submissions. So some of the kind of the high level insights we're sharing may be off by like 1 percentage point, but let's not get too geeky here. So share a couple of numbers. I mean, looks like we as a collective industry went through or came through COVID 2020 largely unscathed.
Yeah, I think yes, but it depends who you are. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'll share some of those growth stats, but as we said, they are likely to change, albeit maybe just by 1% or something either way.
Now you're just putting your research hat on.
I
know. Like, oh, it may change. It's like everybody out there. Oh my God, it might be a percentage off. So don't worry about it. I was
like, take off that hat and put on the podcast host hat.
Put on the podcast. Okay. People are busy. People need the summary. People
get on with it. Yeah. Okay. Well, so the revenue of companies in the LSPI grew around 10% overall. So that's the headline. Very attractive rate of growth from 2019 to 2020. So if you add up all of the total revenues of companies included in 2020, it's around 7.6 billion. So that's what we're capturing there.
Let me pause you there.
Yes.
So 10%, but that's also because we've added additional companies, right?
No.
So that is okay. Like for like, got it.
Yes.
Like for like, but 7.6 billion, that would cover around a third of what we estimate a total market to be. So to the remaining 2/3 of the market, please get in touch. Where are you? Are you hiding in the below 1 million, or are you just not wanting to participate?
Yeah. I mean, let's say, for example, that we did have absolutely every company included, the above 1 million. We would likely exceed our total market size because there is quite a lot of subcontracting that is already happening within some of those companies.
Good point. Yeah, let's not go into the nitty gritty of the math. We're going to get lost. But so, all right. So it grew, but that doesn't mean the industry grew by 10% last year. So why not? If you just tally everything up, it's 10%. Why didn't it grow 10%?
Well, there's a lot of factors, I suppose. I mean, the primary one being that a lot of this growth is the result of M&A. So one company buying another company, looking like it's growing a lot, but not. It's growing inorganically, not organically. So it doesn't necessarily reflect growth in the market. I mean, and I think also, we have to say that for the most part, these submissions are self-reported. It's also optional, obviously, to participate in the LSPI. So there is a possibility that there's a bias towards companies who, did perhaps reasonably well or felt quite happy with their performance. We don't obviously oblige people to participate. So there are maybe some people that were, impacted severely by COVID-19 didn't submit the figures, didn't disclose in 2020. So there is a potential skew, I think, and a potential bias in that respect.
Let's plug one out. So when you say M&A, we're counting RWS as having grown, but of course they acquired SDL. So that's a good example. Mm-hmm. So mid-year they acquired SDL. Would that count towards that, or did we normalize it there?
Right. So if you look at just RWS, I think they announced the acquisition ahead of actually closing the deal. So in terms of, we haven't just added together sort of SDL revenues and RWS revenues for the year. We have added to RWS the kind of number of days that SDL was contributing to RWS revenues in 2020. But RWS itself, they actually report their financial year ends in September. And they reported pretty much flat revenues in 2020 from 2019.
Got it.
So that is a good example, yeah.
So just before we fall into the statistics rabbit hole, so the fact that this acquisition happened and added revenue to one company doesn't mean the market grew. It just means one company grew. One company grew by acquisition, but the market itself didn't grow per se, right? So just to go back, when we're saying the combined revenue, the companies grew 10%, that doesn't mean the market grew. So I think personally, I mean, gut feel market probably was flat to slightly negative in 2020. I mean, it's because again, 10%, given all the M&A that was going on, isn't huge. That 10% headline growth rate, plus maybe some companies didn't submit because they didn't grow, and generally there has been a bit of it was a challenging year, right? Despite that, but even putting in a flat year or a slightly negative year in a crazy year like 2020 is remarkable and is resilient, and shows that this industry is on a long-term growth trajectory. So I mean, let's see what's going on in 2021. I mean, things are going to look good.
And I think just adding to that, to your point, there were a number of companies that submitted that submitted and had declines in 2020. Okay. So about 27%, so just over a quarter of the number of companies that participated had some form of decline in 2020.
Okay.
That was most pronounced among the challengers, 30% of challengers. And boutiques, 28% of boutiques posted declines. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I doubt we're going to see that again in 2021. I'm pretty sure that people are going to grow. Also, from some of the conversations we're having, obviously with people offline, I think a lot of people are very positive for 2021. Mm-hmm. Things are opening up. I just had a great. Before that, we were preparing before the podcast. I was looking at a story we're gonna publish. By the time this comes out, it's probably online already. It's a Blend. It's 1 hour translations. New brand / relaunch. New company called Blend. 1 hour translation, Israel based, and they sent us a team picture, and so it's the entire team on the roof. I would assume of the office building, but it was the entire team. It was like 50 people. And nobody wore a mask. So that, to me, that's like, whoa, we're entering 2021.
But they have a very strong vaccination program if they're all in Israel, don't they?
Yes. They're ahead of the curve, but, we're going to get there. I mean, I was just complaining about the slow vaccine rollout here in Switzerland, but we're going to get there. And then you can have the entire team on a roof without a mask. So this was like the first, I was like, hey, we're getting team pictures with people without masks. And it was like 50 people or more. So great.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are very positive for 2021, and so that kind of resilience theme that we had throughout 2020 kind of bore out mostly, right? I mean, there's big disruption. I mean, this industry was probably 2/3 virtual already, but went fully virtual. No major issues there. I haven't really heard from anybody that like there was some massive operational issues going fully remote. So, speaks to just generally how solid things are set up. But also, I'm starting to hear a lot of grumblings about people like, okay, after 1 year remote, like, oh my God, I just can't take another call. Like, can I just meet some people? Personally, I miss like, stuff like Friday beers, like I used to have with my previous company, like when we, would meet up on a Friday with the team, etc. I think some people are getting quite tired of the remote side. Yeah. So that's for the LSP. I will be doing a lot of follow-up coverage on this in the next couple of weeks, like pluck out some key stats. It takes a while to really analyze it in detail. Frankly, I'm super impressed by companies having their financials ready by the end of February. So thank you.
Yeah, I know. It's great, isn't it, to have it out so soon.
It's it's challenging. I mean, frankly, I don't have the financials for Slater ready yet. So to get all this done by the end of Feb, for us to publish so early is much appreciated, and even some of the bigger ones, that would take some time. I think we chased a couple of the big ones to submit.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Yes, we did. Hello, can you share now? Okay. In other positive news, our job index continues to bounce back. Where are we now? Where we're at?
Yeah, it's bounced back. So this is the job index that we've been tracking for, well, not quite 2 years, but coming up. Oh wait, no, nearly 3 years. Is that right? I'm getting lost. But anyway, since like July 2018, we've been looking at the job index and how that has moved. So it tracks hiring activity in the language industry. And as you might imagine, last year in March, it took a tumble, as did most kind of financial indexes and things, when COVID hit. It's been kind of steadily recovering since around July, August last 2020. Had a slight dip in January, which is sort of a seasonal trend anyway. But this month, so to March 2021, it jumped nearly 10 points, which is kind of, I think, the largest increase we've seen, certainly in COVID times or post COVID times, question
It's
mark.
post. We're getting into post.
Yeah. So, and it's back now to the same kind of levels that it was at in February 2020. So pre-pandemic, essentially. It's a little bit off the all-time highs, but you know, we'll get there.
Looking good. So if you have jobs open, send it to logjobs.com. We have good roles there, and you know, there's good traction when we look at the stats. I mean, a lot of these jobs get a ton of applications because we promote it via the newsletter, which now has 13,500 subscribers, even 30,600 soon. So there's a lot of promotion.
Well, and good candidates as well. We've hired ourselves through LockJobs.
There you go. Yes. Yeah, you get great candidates there. So post it on LockJobs, and you know, when LockJobs becomes big enough, we shall integrate it into our model that's you know, measuring the job index. I think right now we're not. Yeah. But you know, if you start submitting hundreds of roles, we shall integrate it. Just closing off on a quick tech story, we got the Apple Translate app. Just want to highlight a few things. First, appears to be a bit of a dud. We did a bit of a kind of a Twitter tour and looked at some of the feedback. So I think they launched Apple Translate. The app launched in, it was 11 languages with the iOS 14 last summer in September. People there were already like, hey, why is it only covering 11 languages? We should have 30. You know, Google Translate does like more than 100. So, and it also only works on the iPhone, doesn't work on anything else.
Android. Yeah.
Android makes sense though, I guess. And so there's been some criticism also on the quality side, but typically, you know, I mean, you always find these kind of random criticisms of MT, like consumer facing. But so on the app side, consumer side, no major breakthrough. However, I find the website functionality quite impressive, I guess. When you use Safari and you can now click, I think it's using the same underlying engine. So you can click on Safari and just translate an entire website. And, you know, as you know, obviously Slater running a website, I think it's quite impressive how it pulls content, not just the HTML content from the site, but like all of the embedded plugins and everything. Like even our newsletter pop-up that's coming in from like a Ninja pop-up third-party plugin gets translated. You know, it's obviously the general content is typical kind of well-structured NMT with the occasional hilarious portion in it. Like I can't give you an example, but like for when I do it into German, like some of the portions are quite interestingly translated. So it basically shows kind of that it's kind of that proxy you know, rival almost for the proxy website localization piece. So interesting. Go read the story. But now let's go to somebody who knows a ton more about technology than I guess we do collectively. Bob Willens, CEO of XTM.
Definitely.
All right. See you on the other side. Bye.
See you soon.
And welcome back to Slater Pod today with Bob Willens, CEO of XTM. Hi, Bob.
Hi, Florian. Hi, Esther.
Hi, Bob. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
Thanks so much for taking the time. Bob, where are you joining us from today?
So I'm based in, or live and work in Gerrards Cross. So I'm actually in our office, which is in Gerrards Cross.
Okay. That's north, east, west, or south of London?
So that's northwest of London, just outside the M25, so on the way to Oxford.
The M25. When I moved to London in like mid 2000, like 2004, I bought a book called The Orbital, and it was literally one guy like walking around the M25, it's huge. It's like
it is. It takes quite a while to get around, particularly when the traffic's bad.
There you go.
Yeah.
Cool. So well, thanks for joining us. You had some piece of news. Obviously, this at the start of the year, I spoke in the earlier part of the podcast, and we definitely want to touch upon that. But first, tell us a bit more about XTM, like in a nutshell, origin story, trajectory, kind of key client segments.
Sure. So Andy Zydron and I set up XTM in 2002. We started out very small and took a while to ramp up. We very quickly set up a development center based in Poznan, Poland, and today we've still got we've got over 150 people there. So we do all our development, testing, support, marketing, systems admin team are all based out of Poznan, and then we have the rest of our sales team and solutions architects are dotted around the world in North America and South America, Europe, Japan. So XTM, we are pure tech. We don't provide any services, which I'm sure you'll cover a little later. We focus on the large enterprise marketplace. XTM is highly scalable. It's been built with the enterprise in mind, and that's our target market. As a result, we find that we sell to some very big enterprises, and then they specify XTM for their supply chain. So the LSPs use XTM as well.
Got it. Was there any particular reason why you chose Poznan? Did you have like a previous history, whatever, with the place?
The clue is in Andy's surname, Zydron. Andy is of Polish extract, and so he has a lot of family there. So that kind of made sense at the time.
That developed a lot since, I'm sure, since the mid-2000s. I mean,
well, Wojtek Jeselik, who's our technical director, is actually Andy's nephew.
There you go. Family affair. So before XTM, what was your background there? I mean, were you in tech before? What was the career before?
Sure. So, well, as you can see by my age, I've had a fairly long career. Started out in South America, working for a textile company where I was a factory manager in my late 20s. And, that's a pretty good experience about learning about cultures, learning about leadership. So from there, I was in Chile and Brazil and came back and set up an Apple dealership. Went down the entrepreneurial route, did very well in that for a while, and also set up an internet service provider called RedNet. We were one of the first in the UK. We sold that business at the top of the .com bubble in 2000. I then worked for SDL for a few years on one of their early TMS projects called SDL Webflow. And then Andy and I, who I'd known for many years, we were chatting, and he had been working for Xerox and also Ford of Europe, and said, I've got this great idea about creating a TMS, great engine. I said, okay, show it to me. And he said, well, I can't really. So he explained the idea, and then we decided to set up a business to basically write a TMS, a web-based TMS based on XML from scratch. And we've been working hard at it ever since.
Just brief personal. I mean, the Latin America probably having to learn Spanish, did that steer you towards the language tech side at all, or was that?
Well, I'm a scientist by I studied science at university, and so I first of all went to Brazil and had to learn Portuguese, and then trying trying to swap from Portuguese to Spanish, you have to forget one to learn the other.
True.
But I did anyway. So yeah, it's great when you can actually communicate in the local language.
Indeed.
Yeah. So you've come a long way then since sort of setting up the company in 2002. And let's come back to the present day a little bit and talk about you teaming up with investment firm K1. So it seems like this is the first time you're taking in or bringing in outside capital.
We had a couple of very early investors, LSPs who were keen to support us in our early days, but this is the first real serious investment. Why now? We've taken the company from $0 to $10 million turnover. I think we can see the whole marketplace is really hotting up. There's been a lot of M&A activity. I think that the competition is becoming increasingly strong. We needed to project where we would be in the next 5 years. We're very ambitious in terms of growth, in terms of our product, and we thought it was the right time to bring in some external expertise, bolster our existing management team. So and we worked with EY for about 2 years on their fast growth platform, and they helped us enormously in terms of preparing for the investment, in terms of getting just the KPIs that you need for a SaaS business. We learned a lot from that, in terms of MRR, ARR, churn rate, customer lifetime value, all these kind of things, which are really, really, really important. And then, we approached a number of different private equity firms. We chose K1 really because they were able to add the most value to us. They have an operations team based in Los Angeles who have a wide range of expertise. K1 specialize in fast growth SaaS businesses, B2B, and so their operations team have a huge amount of knowledge there that they can share with us to help us on our next level of growth.
And I mean, it sounds like obviously quite a long process, potentially lots of things involved. How distracting was it to go through that process while running the business?
Yeah, I mean, we tried not to distract the people really doing the hard work. The developers and the salespeople and the solution architects and the support team. They were not that involved. But for the senior management team, yes, absolutely, we had to. But it's part of the process of growing the business. For me, it was really educational and interesting, and I think it's prepared us, as I say, for the next phase of our growth.
Let's go a little macro. Why do you think now, especially 2020, was like the year for TMS funding? I mean, you said that some of your competitors got funded. You also took on board. Why now? Why 2019, 2020? Except maybe.
Yeah, I don't think it's anything to do with COVID. No. Put it that way. But I think the whole translation business is. Previously was very people-centric, very reliant on people. It's now becoming far more tech-centric, so that, in order to provide the service, you've got to have the right technology. As a result, the technology sector is growing rapidly. You've got NMT one hand, you've got TMSs on the other hand, you've got lots of other technologies coming in there. And where there's growth, you get companies that are interested in investing, whether through acquisition or as a private equity firm or VC. So there is a kind of a land grab going on at the moment. There's such fast growth that companies realize that they have to win clients as quickly as possible, and in order to do that, you do need the resources to be able to go out there and make an impact.
Interesting, yeah.
Mm. And expanding on that, I mean, how do you sort of broadly think that the TMS landscape has evolved and changed over the past 2 decades? What are some of the key shifts? If that's not too long a longer time frame to.
Well, obviously, when we first started out, the predominant TMSs were not web based, and we set out right from day one to ensure XTM was going to be web-based. So we wanted a SaaS model with self-provisioning. We wanted XTM to be entirely web-based, not something that you have to download files and work offline. But we wanted the functionality there to be as good as or better than anything else on the market. And so I think that's obviously been a big step forward. Obviously other companies have subsequently come into that space and are doing very well. Other areas where I've seen really big changes is in terms of the, obviously machine translation has come on enormously, and the way we look at machine translation is it's another tool for the translator. So obviously that changes how the work that the translator does. It's not just a question of seeing a translation memory match and accepting it or modifying a fuzzy match. Now it's more post-editing, and I think that trend will continue. There'll be more and more use of machine translation, AI for automating other things apart from the actual machine translation. We have done a huge amount of work on our proprietary technology that we call interlanguage vector space, and that is a cornerstone for our AI strategy. So we're using that for alignment of parallel text. We're using it for bilingual terminology extraction, and we have lots of plans for enhancing our translation environment with it as well. So things like predictive typing. So that is all coming in, and I think we're going to see automation, more and more automation of the processes, so that project managers, for example, only have to get involved for exceptions rather than doing the routine stuff day in, day out.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you talk about that. I mean, and in terms of what you mentioned, a couple of things that XTM has been working on. Is there anything that you think, looking back in the past sort of 4 to 5 years, has really helped you, or really served a particular purpose for clients?
Well, a couple of things there, really. I think maybe 4 years ago, we decided that what we called XTM Editor, our translation environment, which we'd started building way back in the early 2000s, had reached end of life. So we took the conscious decision to rewrite it from scratch using the latest technology, React. And we had a lot of input from translators to make sure we got the user experience right. And so that took us a long time. It's very complex, a lot of functionality, but we've completed that. It's launched. We have built into that now what we call the visual mode that allows users to be able to visualize the source and target while they're translating in real time. And we also have what we call CAR, computer-aided review, which is a translation environment or a review environment which has been can be customized to the specific requirements. So you can hide certain features, because the problem with a fully functional workbench is that it gets very, very complex, and you've got so much going on there that, you know, a reviewer thinks, oh God, I don't want to use this because it's too complicated. So if you can strip it down and simplify it, then it makes their whole work experience much better, and we found that's really a very key thing for us. The other thing, if I
keep going,
the other thing that we've been working on really very hard are connectors, and you know, that's an ongoing project for us. We're building connectors to all the major content management systems, to repositories, and you know, it's not just a question of a simple integration. We want to have a deep integration with lots of functionality, where the user within the content management system can decide which content they want to send, how to send it, when to send it, track the content as it's going through the translation, set, for example, a workflow template within XTM, all from within the content management system, and then obviously receive the translated content back automatically to the right place. And in some cases, we can do the preview of the web page within XTM, so that you can reduce on the requirement to do a review cycle within the CMS.
Got a couple of follow-ups on that. So on the connector side, as a non-developer, like, is it primarily a development problem, or is it also a kind of a contractual problem where you need to go to all these, you know, I don't know, the EPRI servers or whatever of this world and ask for their permission, and then it's like a 2-year approval process? Or just for people that are not familiar with that process, how hard is it, and where's the problem?
Well, the problems are multiple. One, first of all, we're not an expert in many of the CMSs out there, so we need to find people who are experienced in them, and we've done that in many of them. And we have, so then you then have to start building the connector. And you know, whenever you're connecting to systems, there are always sort of issues that you come across in terms of connectivity. They have to be sorted. And then, of course, you have to bear in mind that the CMS will change versions, it will update, and that may break your connector. So you've got to be one step ahead of that. And then, of course, you know, while we're selling a lot of XTM, only a percentage of those users will want a connector. So the volume of sales, relatively speaking, of a connector isn't as great as XTM itself. So that's another factor to bear in mind. But in terms of the improvement in functionality, it's enormous. It just cuts out so much routine work.
Absolutely. And then another one on the cloud. So, you know, when you started in 2002, there was no AWS. So, like,
no.
How is it? How you mentioned before also that you had to basically just ditch the entire previous kind of CAT component and recode it from scratch. Like on the cloud and just the infrastructure layer, is that also like at some point you reach like you reach a point where like, well, now there is AWS. Let's just re-engineer the entire thing, or is it much more of a gradual transition?
So we have the flexibility to deploy in a number of different ways. We have our multi-tenant cloud, which is the self-provisioning one that people know, but we also have private cloud. And private cloud is a single tenant solution for the larger enterprise. So then having done that, we can also do single tenant private clouds on AWS as well. So we use a combination. We also use a company called OVH, who are one of, I think, Europe's largest hosting company. We use them for some solutions and AWS for other.
I think Systrans on it, OVH, if I remember correctly. Totally different question. Tech only versus tech and services. You mentioned it before, and let's go back to this age-old question. So
Yeah.
you're very firmly on the tech-only side. Makes sense. Makes a lot of conversations, I guess, with investors also easier when you don't mix the two. But would you see any kind of scenario where a service provider, where it would make sense for them to pursue a path of developing all of the technology in-house? Like where they say, well, we want to own everything. We want to know everything from the TMS to the CAD to, all of these connectors. We want to do everything ourselves. Do you see any scenario where that would make sense?
Well, I mean, TransPerfect have done that, haven't they? They've done that very successfully. So, but however, from our point of view, and what we hear very loud and very clear from our customers is they would prefer to have a vendor neutral technology, so that they can then pick and choose which LSP they use, and they can evaluate one against the other. And the point is also that the enterprise controls their own assets. They're reducing or mitigating the risk of their assets, to their IP, because essentially their translation memory, all the content is their IP. And so, we feel that a lot of companies really want to control that very closely.
Got it.
And when you're thinking about what's important to clients, maybe let's talk a bit about how you prioritize things like feature requests, how you balance out customization versus general progress of the product. How do you balance that? What takes precedence?
Yeah, that's a pretty tough situation where I'm sure all tech providers face. We have our product manager, Sarah. She has something called product board. It's a product board where she gets all the feedback from our customers, and we enter all these things on there. We have internal items that we want to do as well, because things need to be updated, or we have our own strategic direction that we want to go in. So they all get put on the product board, and then we have a meeting, and we discuss what can we squeeze into. Because we do 4 releases a year, and how we partition those items into each release. But we're just about to release a new feature on our website based on product board that will allow our key clients to go in, and they'll be able to see what we've released, what we have lined up for our next release, and they'll be able to see or create requests for new items, or vote on existing items that are already there. So it's a more interactive way for customers to be able to see what we're doing and participate in the whole roadmap.
I think that'll take care of a few more support tickets, right? You can probably scale that
hopefully,
back a little
yes.
bit. No, I understand. I mean, it's very complicated. Like, you need to obviously want to do as much as possible for clients, but if you do everything, then it becomes totally overloaded, right? That's complex.
You have to have a balance. But at the same time, we like to stay responsive to our customers' claims. We would just love to be able to sell XDM and show it to the customer, and they say, yeah, that's perfect. Just what I wanted. Thank you. But inevitably they say, yeah, that's great, but we wanted to do X, Y, Z. And so we're responsive to that and try and help them achieve their goals.
The dynamics of where they are on the kind of localization maturity level. Can you just speak a little bit to that? When some clients are really far ahead, they have internal localization teams, they have a lot of it figured out, as opposed to maybe, companies that are in an earlier stage. Is that a dynamic that is very important to you, or it doesn't really matter in day to day?
Well, I think they're two different types of customer. The mature customer probably got a TMS already, as you say, probably have a translation or localization department with a head. Their existing TMS, they may be coming up against some kind of limitation on that, or some issue that they're looking at alternatives. And so for us, we love those kind of customers because they know what they want. They know, and we can usually help them very well. On the, shall we say, the more greenfield site where they don't have a TMS and they're probably less experienced in the whole process, then that's an area we're increasingly targeting, because we can see that it's a huge area that we haven't really focused on a lot in the past. But certainly in our plans for the future, that's an area we want to tackle more seriously.
And just briefly on you have some LSP, or you have LSP clients, but as you mentioned, the focus really is on the enterprise. What's the dynamics there? Are the LSPs, I don't know, easier to handle, or I don't know what's the best way to put this?
I think LSPs are one, they know what they want. They know their business. So from that respect, it's good. I think there's a bit of a challenge with LSPs in that they have to be able to process anything their customer asks them. Whereas an enterprise generally has a more consistent flow of translation tasks because they have a standard production workflow. But having said that, XTM is a very flexible, agile tool, and so can easily be adapted to all the requirements that an LSP would need.
Got it.
And maybe I think we touched on machine translation and sort of the impact that that's having on the TMS space a little bit previously. But I mean, I guess a twofold question. What's your view on how machine translation is shaping TMS development generally? And then also, what do you perceive to be the natural limits of kind of the integration between MT and TMS, if there are any?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, so machine translation is having a profound effect on the whole production cycle. There's far more machine translation going on now than there was last year, than the year before. So what is happening is that we need to adapt XTM or our TMS to be able to accommodate that. And in order to do that, we've recently, for example, added the ability to calculate the cost based on edit distance. On what has a post editor actually had to do to bring the machine translation up to acceptable standard, and this is the edit distance. This is the cost. So that kind of change that we've had to make in order to accommodate it. But how far will it go? It's a tough question. I mean, I'm sure we haven't reached the limits of machine translation yet. Some of the machine translation suppliers are now using translation memory in real time to enhance their matches. So there's lots of tricks that can still be done to improve it.
Can we just dwell a little bit? You said the ability to calculate cost based on the edit distance.
Yeah.
Is that post or before?
So
how does that work?
No. You'd have to calculate the cost obviously after the editing has been done, but historically you would calculate the cost based on the number of words or some kind of algorithm based around the words. Now it's really more when you're dealing principally with post editing. How much words is really not a relevant thing. You can work on time. You can base how long has a post editor had to spend on this task, or you can actually say, how many characters have had to be changed within this particular segment of text.
It's fascinating. I mean, it's really we have a report on the pricing, the topic coming up. I think there's massive changes going on, and a company like XTM sits at the heart of it. With basically, you're at the hub. You're the TM, the MT, the human, the client. It's just fascinating what's going on. So talking about fascinating and in terms of the outlook, I mean, the industry has gone through this super challenging year quite well. We just published our LSPI index with all of the service providers and their revenues. We've got like 170 of them now. So generally, I think a positive year given the circumstances. But what's your outlook for the next 3 to 5 years? I mean, you have an outside partner now. You can ramp up investing in all kinds of areas. So where are you going to deploy some of that capital, and what's your priorities in terms of growing?
Okay, so from our point of view, we see the market continuing to grow. We see XTM as in an ideal position. We've got a great product, great team. But at the moment, we are just scratching the surface of many markets. We have a very wide cross section of verticals, from tech companies to construction to retail, through life sciences, to LSPs. We have a very wide cross section of companies. But realistically, there is 100 more out there. Where we have one market leader, we could be selling to 100. So from our point of view, there's great potential, and I think K1 recognized that XTM is a market leader in this respect, and can they will support us to capitalize on that potential.
Great, yeah, no, I think it's exciting times. It's also when we talk to people, offline. I'm sensing a lot of buzz. I'm sensing a lot of optimism generally, which is, it's a bit different from like maybe a little bit of the MT panic of like 2017, 2018. I think people now realize
there was definite panic, thinking, my God, this is the end of the translation industry as we know it today. But whereas now you just have to accept that things evolve, and, MT is another tool, and we got to make the most use of it we can. And, just provide a better service. Do you know the volume of translation?
Just going to say that
it just goes up.
It just goes up.
The better tools you have, the more translation you can do.
Absolutely, and the better the translation becomes at scale, the more people want to have good translation and are completely, wouldn't accept anything bad anymore. I mean, if you have a poorly translated website these days, it's way more embarrassing.
It's embarrassing.
10 years ago. Yeah. All right. On that positive note, we shall leave it for today. Thanks so much for joining us, Bob.
Well, thank you, Florian. And thanks, Esther. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks.
All right. Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.